Sharon. My first guest tonight is Josh Frydenberg. Josh, welcome.
Nice to be with you.
The former Prime Minister Tony Abbott has spoken to Chris Kenny, that will air in about an hour's time, and said that he won't rule out a return to the front bench and he will stay for the full term if re-elected, which he clearly will be. He has a very safe seat. Should he return to the front bench? Are his talents wasted on the back bench?
Well, it won't surprise you to say those are decisions beyond my pay grade, Patricia.
Well, I know you won't be making the decision, but what's your view?
Well, I've said in the past I couldn't see Tony Abbott coming back into the cabinet anytime soon. But again, they're not my decisions. But the point is, Tony Abbott is running again for the seat of Warringah. I read the transcript of his launch today of his campaign, and he did make the point that if you re-elect the Turnbull government, you'll get a stable, competent government. You won't get the return of the carbon tax. You will get a strong border protection policy, and you will get a series of policies to grow the economy.
Okay, but if he was talented enough to be our Prime Minister, how can he not be good enough to be a frontbencher?
Well, those are questions not to direct at me.
But so you have some sympathy for that view?
No, look, I've said in the past I can't see Tony Abbott coming back either to the leadership or to the front bench. But those are decisions for the Prime Minister, and I think they're really a distraction from what really is at play in this election, which is a contest between Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten, and their two opposing views about what a better Australia looks like.
Okay, let's get to one of those contests, which is negative gearing. Now, I watched the leaders' debate on Friday night very closely. The Prime Minister quoted the bankers, rather the real estate agents. He also quoted the bankers, but in this case the real estate agents as a defence for why you are opposed, and said you should trust them. Basically, people laughed. I mean, nobody really trusts real estate agents. They're not highly trusted. Anyone who's gone to an auction would back me up here. Are they really your strongest defence?
Well, you referred to the bankers and you referred to the real estate agents. Let me deal with them individually.
No, just the real estate agents.
Oh, right,
there was
okay.
a mistake there on the bankers.
Well, no, because on the bankers, what the Prime Minister has pointed out repeatedly is that the RBA and the Council of Financial Regulators have taken steps to tighten the lending to investors, and that has helped calm the property market, which has been very significant, and that's been confirmed by the head of the Reserve Bank, Glenn Stevens. Now, on the real estate agents, they're the ones who know that industry best. I brought together a whole series of real estate agents from my electorate, including the chairman of the Real Estate Institute of Australia and the CEO of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, to talk about these issues. And they were unequivocal about the impact it will have in driving up rents and driving down housing values.
They're self-interested, and they are.
No, because it's just, firstly, it's common sense here, Patricia. You take a third of the buyers out of the market. You don't think prices for housing or housing values will go down. And also when it comes to rents, because people can make a capital gain because they negative gear a property, they're prepared to take a lower rent. And that has been the evidence from other jurisdictions.
Bill Shorten made a very potent point in the debate. He said, there's all these people, you know, negative gearing, but they have no taxable income. Do you find it odd? I do.
Well, firstly, 2/3 of the people who use negative gearing have taxable incomes under $80,000. And what that does prove is that so many of the people who negative gear, and the majority of them have only one property, are people who could be teachers or police persons or other community workers who have sought to make one type of investment, and that is in property, which does appreciate over time. Now, as for the individual circumstances of those people who don't have any taxable income, I mean, they might be sole traders who had major losses in previous years.
Is it strange? Would some of them be rorting the system?
I don't find it strange, but what I do find strange is that the Labor Party will still allow you to negative gear against your property or investment income, i.e. those people who are the wealthier members of our society who have got major investments will still be allowed a negative gear, but those people who have a wage or a salary will not be. And I think that's an inconsistency that goes at the heart of the problem in the Labor Party's policy.
In that debate, the Prime Minister was pressed on the issue of excesses in negative gearing, and he said there are no excesses. That is a different line to what the Treasurer is saying, and I've really looked at this very closely. The Treasurer is saying there are still some, yes, I would, wouldn't I? There are some excesses still, but it's not worth the risk. The Prime Minister says there are none. Are there none?
Well, we think the policy as it stands, the negative gearing policy, works well, and it's important.
But are
for the
there
economy.
excesses?
Well, we don't see that there are excesses that need to be dealt with. So the Prime Minister.
So there are some excesses that just don't need to be dealt with?
No, we don't think there are excesses there.
At all. There are no excesses in negative gearing. You're saying that to me, really?
Well,
I would put to you that Voters don't agree with that.
Well, what the Prime Minister has made very clear is that we've looked at this issue and we've weighed it all up, and then we've looked also at the Labor Party's policy, which will be disastrous. And we think it's very important to the health of the Australian economy that we don't touch this very important investment for millions of Australians.
On the issue of the Prime Minister's wealth, which appears to have become a real issue in the campaign, can you blame Labor for using this issue against him when actually even Barnaby Joyce, and there are others, but Barnaby Joyce has sought to make it an issue, boasting about the Prime Minister's wealth? He's made a quid. It's front and centre of the campaign now, partly because you've made it that way, haven't you?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's background in business is something that we should be very proud of, because we've got someone who's leading our country, who's had prior experience to the Parliament and has been very successful in that area. And if you take our innovation policy, which has been well received, it's been written by the Prime Minister, who knows that industry firsthand, given his own previous experience. So what we have to be aware of, though, is the Labor Party's politics of envy, this class warfare that they've ever tried since Jack Lang in the 1930s, and that we also saw in the Rudd-Gillard years. I think people find it extremely divisive, and Menzies, by the way, when he was Prime Minister, rebelled against that level of class warfare, and it's intrinsic in the Liberal Party to help people, to have a progressive series of policies that don't engage in this sort of class warfare.
Why would they be going there unless it resonates, unless a very sizable portion of voters feel left out of the system, feel as if they're missing out? That's what they're touching on, and that's dangerous to you, whether you think it's right or wrong. Politically, I'm asking the question. That's dangerous to you.
Well, I think it will backfire politically on the Labor Party.
Hasn't yet.
Well, we're 1 week into a 8-week campaign, right? But the point here is the Labor Party are telling fibs, because if you look at our budget, and they, the ABC fact checker of all people have said that Labor's claim that we're not looking after, the lower income earners is wrong, because if you look at the budget's initiatives, for example in super, the low income superannuation tax offset, which helps the lower income earners, the middle income tax cut, the fact that we've targeted the higher end on superannuation changes, all those things.
I've said this as well, $6 billion from super, absolutely, and yet you're not getting any bounce on the fairness issue, and yet you've really raided super and taken on your own base, really at your detriment, given the response from the IPA and others.
Well, let me just say, I'll come to super in 1 sec, but on the fairness and equity argument, we'll continue to make the case. And one aspect of the budget which was really well received was that initiative called PATH, Prepare, Train and Hire, where we're spending $800 million to help 30,000 young people every year under the age of 25 get into the workforce when they're currently, on unemployment benefits. That is an initiative where we're helping people who have been, on the edge of either society or of employment. When it comes to super, it is a contested space. But the point about our reforms is they go back to the heart of what the purpose of super is, which is what David Murray said about being a substitute or a supplement for the age pension.
Peter Credlin, the former Chief of Staff to Tony Abbott, says that the coalition looks devious on superannuation.
Well, Peter Credlin's just wrong.
She's just wrong?
Just wrong.
You don't look devious at all? Particularly in this issue of retrospectivity, where, I've gone through it as well, because I thought, who's right here? I better do some primary research myself. 2007.
Well, we're still not taxing people in that retirement phase at up to $1.6 million, which for many people is a large sum of money, and it's per individual, so it could be $3.2 million per couple. That is a reform designed to bring more equity into the system. We don't believe the changes are retrospective, and indeed, others have made that case as well.
Bill Shorten has fiercely rejected these calls by the Attorney General, George Brandis, to disendorse the candidate for Dunkley, Peter Murphy, over those issues of national security. He's raised, I think, a pretty interesting point that Tim Wilson, who is also one of your candidates, has also raised issues around national security. So if you're going to go there, they're going to go there too. Did the Attorney General go too far?
No.
The Prime Minister hasn't backed him.
Well, the point about what Peter Murphy is the candidate the Labor Party has in Dunkley, is saying we shouldn't be going ahead and listing groups like Hamas and al-Shabaab and other terrorist organisations. What Tim Wilson has raised was issues about, which were much, of a lower end than that. So I think, Peter Murphy does have real questions to answer in the seat of Dunkley.
Okay, so should the Labor Party disendorse?
Well, as the Prime Minister said, they're questions for Bill Shorten.
Not according to George Brandis. He says Labor should disendorse. So you're taking a different line to George Brandis.
No, well, George is absolutely right to put the onus back onto to Bill Shorten, because George Brandis knows, as the first law officer of the Commonwealth, how serious the terrorist threat is, and he's been very successful, done a brilliant job in getting through the Parliament a number of pieces of important legislation. Now, right now, Australia has more than 100 people who are fighting in Iraq and in Syria. We've cancelled more than 150 passports. We've lost, you know, by some estimates, at least 48 Australians who have died in Syria and Iraq. And we're told by ASIO and the Federal Police they have more than 400 high-value, high-priority terrorist-related investigations underway. This is a very serious issue here in Australia, just as like it is around the world, and we can't afford any dilly-dallying on national security, and that's why Peter Murphy has
on
a case
national
to answer.
security, at least at a national level, Bill Shorten has given you very strong bipartisan support for a number of your measures. Given that strong bipartisan support, what do you make of this debate? I mean, do you think that ultimately national security is really defining this campaign?
No, I think national security and border protection do morph into one, because we know how important border protection is.
But do you think Labor's pretty strong on this issue?
Well, I think there are some within the Labor Party who are stronger than
the leadership?
others.
Do you think the leadership is strong on this issue?
I think there are some within the Labor Party who are stronger than others.
There's a reason I'm asking, and that's because Michael Kroger says that it's worth possibly doing a deal and giving preferences to the Greens in key seats in Victoria, and you're a Victorian, so you're the perfect guy to ask. A cabinet minister and a Victorian. I'm a Victorian. This is a perfect conversation.
And a proud one.
Yeah, but to give preferences to the Greens over Labor, because the Greens and Labor are the same. But they're not on national security, are they? And you say that's a very important issue.
Well, they're certainly not the same on national security.
But they're not the same on a number of things.
They're not the same on tax policy. They're not, not the same on the ANZUS alliance. In many ways, what a number of the Greens' policies are an anathema to what the coalition's positions are. But issues about strategy and tactics and preferences are not for me.
Okay, but he makes the argument
that
they're much of a muchness, and that's why his position has changed on preferencing them. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think Michael Kroger has said is it's a little more sophisticated than you're making
it's exactly
out.
as it is. I spoke to him on my radio program. Believe me, I've teased it out.
What he has said is, under Richard Di Natale, there's been a more pragmatic approach from the Greens. But if you look at within the Greens' broader policy remit, I think there are some pretty bad elements.
So should you be preferencing the Greens?
Well, that is a decision for Tony.
What do you think? Do you think it's the right thing to do?
I've gone as far as I want to go.
No, you haven't.
Yes,
Tell me, what do you think? Is it the right thing to do?
Issues of
what's your instinct? But I'm not saying it's your decision, but what is your instinct?
My instincts are that the policies of the Greens are an anathema to liberal values. But as for strategies and tactics to get the most number of Liberals elected to the Parliament,
why would you do a deal with people that you think about evil?
Well, those are matters for Tony Nutt and his team in the organisational wing, and it's always been thus. We in the parliamentary wing will decide matters of policy, and those in the organisational wing will decide matters related to the election like this one.
Josh Frydenberg, your friend Ed Husick's on next, so I've got to say goodbye to you.
Give him my love and tell him my mum's got a meal waiting for him when he gets down.
I will. Thank you very much.
See you.
That's Josh Frydenberg joining us there, of course, in the Cabinet.